Morning, everyone. Submitting my humble pranams to His Holiness Jagadguru Shri Shivaratri Deshikendra Mahaswamiji. I am Dr. M.P. Gaurav, Assistant Professor, JSS College of Pharmacy, Mysore, Constituent College of JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research. JSS College of Pharmacy, Mysore, in association with Indian Society for Clinical Research South Chapter, together we are organizing a webinar series on Pharma Toolkit. It's my privilege to welcome you all for the first lecture series on quality aspects of product lifecycle management. On this occasion, our Honorable Pro Chancellor Dr. B. Suresh and Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Surendra Singh have conveyed their best wishes for the webinar series. I extend a warm welcome to Ms. Lakshmi Achyuta, who is the speaker for today's lecture series. I welcome you, madam.
Thank you.
I heartily welcome the panelist, Dr. Radhika Bobba, Regional Director, PSI, CRO Bangalore. I welcome you, ma'am. Ms. Mala Srivastav, Managing Partner, CRO Bangalore. I welcome you, ma'am. And Dr. Gaurav Mathur, Senior Director, Regulatory Affairs, Pyraxal International, Bangalore. I welcome you, sir. I extend a warm welcome to Dr. T.M. Pramod Kumar, who is the Principal, JSS College of Pharmacy, Mysore, and the Chairman for today's webinar series. I welcome you, sir. I welcome Dr. D.V. Gowda, who is the Professor and Head, JSS College of Pharmacy, Department of Pharmaceutics, and the convener for this webinar series. I heartily welcome you, sir. I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Bala Muralidhara V, Coordinator for the webinar series of Pharma Toolkit, and Dr. H.V. Gangadharappa, Organizing Secretary for this webinar series. I welcome you, sir. Lastly, a special welcome to all the guests and participants who have registered and participating in this webinar. I am very sure this webinar will be very informative. This webinar mainly focuses on understanding the role of quality lifecycle management to ensure product performance, reliability, and safety, which are aligned with the requirements for a product's lifecycle. With this brief introduction, now I request Dr. Shailesh to introduce today's guest, Ms. Lakshmi Achyuta. Over to you, Shailesh.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning.
Yes. Starting with Lakshmi Achyuta, she provides advisory service to biotech, pharma, and medical devices companies, startups, innovation centers for strategy, quality, compliance, and skill enhancement across drug discovery, development, preclinical, clinical, manufacturing, and commercialization. Lakshmi is a quality and compliance professional with nearly 3 decades of experience and combined knowledge, expertise, and skill in implementing, integrating, and auditing multiple standards in disparate management system, having worked in biotechnology, biopharmaceutical, clinical research, contract research, and manufacturing services industries with increasing responsibilities at the Biocon group of companies, Biocon, Clinigen, and Syngene for 27 years of experience. She is a consultant faculty for Biocon Academy, Tech Graduate Institute Biosciences Program, Biotechnology Skill Enhancement Program, workshops and training with National Law School of India University. As head corporate quality and regulatory compliance for CRAMS, she established a compliance framework for verticals, business units, as well as partnerships, collaborations, alliances. Continued QMS of discovery, development, manufacturing chemical development, biologics, and formulations. She established and headed quality assurance for many CRO, handling relevant regulations and standards, developed and established clinical quality assurance and processes thereof for phase 2 and phase 4 clinical trials. She has led, managed, and guided cross-functional teams during various types of regulatory inspections, certification audits for various management systems, audits for customer as well as sponsor. Also, due diligence, loss prevention, business risk, CSR, confidential information, data integrity, asset protection audits. She has earned her MSc in Applied Botany, Medicinal and Aromatic Plants from Bangalore University, and also she has an MS in Quality Management from BITS, Hilali. I welcome you, madam.
Thank you very much, sir, Dr. Hemant. Thank you very much, Dr. Bala Muralidhara. Thank you very much for the invitation. On behalf of Indian Society for Clinical Research, we thank you for the opportunity. I am from the South Chapter. I'm part of their South Chapter core team. And we thank you very much for partnering with ISCR. And it's a very, very important initiative taken by JSS College, which will definitely provide value to the students and the various other stakeholders. With this regard, we would like to thank the organizing committee of Chief Patron Dr. B. Suresh, the Pro Chancellor of JSS AHER, Patron Dr. Surinder Singh, Vice Chancellor JSS AHER, Chairman of the organizing committee Dr. T.M. Pramod Kumar, Dean Faculty of Pharmacy and Principal, JSS College of Pharmacy, Mysore. We would like to thank the convener, Dr. D.V. Gowda, HOD Department of Pharmaceutics, JSS College of Pharmacy, Mysuru. We would like to thank Coordinator Dr. Bala Muralidhara B, Assistant Professor, Department of Pharmaceutics, JSS College of Pharmacy. And we would like to thank the Organizing Secretary, Dr. H.V. Gangadharappa, Assistant Professor, Department of Pharmaceutics, JSS College of Pharmacy, Mysore. I would like to thank my fellow colleagues from the ISCR, Dr. Radhika Bobba, Dr. Gaurav Mathur, and Ms. Mala Srivastava for having coordinated this important activity with the ISCR and JSS College of Pharmacy and Advanced Education. So with this regard, can I initiate the session?
Definitely, madam. Without taking much of your time, we will be starting the seminar. And over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I start my presentation, I would like to give a brief about the ISCR introduction. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. We were able to see.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, madam.
Just a brief about Indian Society for Clinical Research, a premier research. I'll be providing you the introduction. It was launched in 2005 as a professional association with various stakeholders involved in clinical research. So we have the entire clinical research community coming in together. We have the principal investigators, we have ethics committee, we have the sponsors, we have the CRO, and this is where we all come together to enhance the clinical research activity and to advise the stakeholders. It is a registered society with a charter to represent the interest of clinical research community. As you know, it's evolving more so because of the pandemic last year, 2020. ISCR's vision is to enable India to be a global leader in clinical research, and its mission is to inspire and align diverse stakeholders to shape and foster in India an environment facilitating ethical and responsible clinical research for better patient outcomes. So we have, as we said earlier, stakeholders from various organizations coming together. So we have the members coming in from institutions or companies that are involved in clinical research, investigators and site staff, people who are interested and trained in clinical research, individual members from the clinical research industry. We have members from the ethics committees, and we have accredited member organizations and individual members as well. So it's quite a big database that we have. The current office bearers are Dr. Sanish Davis, who's the president, and Dr. Seema Pai is the honorary general secretary, and Mr. Anirban Roy Chowdhury is the treasurer of ISCR. The executive committee members include Dr. Chirag Trivedi. These are the leaders in the clinical research, Ms. Sunila Thatte, Mr. Kedar Nayak, Dr. J. Vijay Venkatraman, Dr. Rajesh Kher, Ms. Amita Bhave, Dr. Usha Rani Pingali, Dr. Dennis Xavier. So we have various council and chapters which synergize to bring in together the best. So we have about 7 councils and 4 chapters, and each of them has a chair and co-chair who support the members and drive their activities over completely. Like we have instances in councils like Clinical Data Management, Biostatistics and Medical Writing Council, Ethics Council, the Investigator Council, the Pharmacovigilance Council, the Regulatory Council, Real World Evidence Council, and Training Council. So we do have 4 chapters for the area that we are in: North, South, East, West. That's Delhi, Bengaluru, Kolkata, Mumbai. And is to have basically to have a regular meeting in an informal setting. So we connect or we liaise to encourage stakeholders across through cross participation, so that the ideas, the best practices are shared, again at the end of the day, for patient safety. And we do collaborate with various councils, and the leads for this year, the coordinators for this year are North chapter is Miss Neha Gupta, South is Dr. Gaurav Mathur, in the West is Ms. Renuka Naugi, and in East is Shubhra Jyoti Bhaumik. So we do have annual conference. In fact, this year we hosted the first virtual conference because of the pandemic, of the situation that we are all in. We had an opportunity to host the first virtual conference, annual conference, and we had the USFDA office from New Delhi joining us, with the deputy director herself, Dr. Sarah McMillan, herself attending. And we, in fact, I facilitated a workshop with USFDA for the inspections. We do have the ISER awards. It's the first to constitute awards for the clinical research in India to recognize and reward performers. And we do have these being given annually. Advocacy initiatives, the media awareness programs, and very importantly, the educational programs. So we do reach out to stakeholders like ethics committee, research institutions, to train them. And in 2020, in spite of the pandemic, we had 11 workshops, again, wherein we had it related to e-Sugam and FICCI, regulatory reforms, etc. The autumn conference was held, and we had the 7-part web conference series, Clinical Research During and After COVID-19 Times, how to adjust to the new normal. And CRC certification, we are doing the second batch. It's going on, Clinical Research Coordinator certification. Some of the snapshots of the various stakeholders involved. This is Dr. Chirag. And we do have a very important journal. It's called Perspectives in Clinical Research. It's the official publication of the Indian Society for Clinical Research. It's published quarterly. And we are honored to have Dr. Arun Bhatt, who's a very, very well-known clinical research professional, as the editor of this particular journal. Who can join ISER? Any working professional associated with clinical research with at least 1 to 2 years experience. And there is, if you can become a life member, you can participate in various council and ISER activities. And these are the various membership available. The life membership is for about 5,000 rupees. And the benefits are take part in various society activities, get concessions. Not to say that students don't get it now, you do get it. And you have the leads of India and across the world coming in to provide lectures. And especially, I think last autumn conference, we had the chair coming in from the vaccine lead. One of the vaccine leaders had come in to provide his perspective of the COVID-19 vaccine. So you get to interact with the industry's thought process. Okay, and we do get updates. And of course, we do get access to the journal, very, very important journal. You can reach out to info@iscr.org for any further information, or you can even visit the website. So this is about ISER. I'd like to now go forward with my presentation, and it's a very, very important aspect. As I open my slide deck, it's a very important aspect related to pharmaceutical research. Are you able to see my slide?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Very important aspects of today, what we are facing today, that is the pandemic, is the quality of the medication. So today we are going to explore the various quality aspects of product life cycle management, part of the Pharma Toolkit series. The objective today is to explore the definitions. We explore the key concepts. We explore the quality strategy required. We explore the product life cycle. What do you mean by product life cycle? Because this is something that we need to keep in mind, because we are all in this particular industry, and hence it's very, very important that we do understand the requirements. Quality as such, I'm sure you would agree with me, is difficult to define. Why is it so? Because it varies from industry to industry. It varies from within the industry as well. But the consensus is that it is to meet or exceed the customer expectations. So today we'll understand who these customers are for us in the pharmaceutical industry, and we also explore what their requirements are. So this is how we initiate the thought process of understanding what the quality requirements are. Very important for us to understand is stakeholders. I'm sure you're going to come across this terminology when you enter the industry. Stakeholders. Who are these stakeholders? What do you mean by stakeholders? Are you aware of their requirements? So this is something definitely will be a thought. Stakeholders are people who are interested in the entire pharmaceutical industry, or in the in the healthcare world. Any interested parties. And who are these interested parties here? We have the regulators, we have the society and the patient, and of course we have the hospital and institutions with them. Then we have the industry, that is you and me and the executive management from the industry. And then we have the investors. Because as you are aware, many of the pharmaceutical industry or the companies are all publicly traded. That means they are in the public domain. That means not necessarily as in traded in equity in the stock market, but also we have a lot of foreign direct investment coming in over there, foreign institutional investments also over there, and financial institutions investing in the companies. And these people, the shareholders, are very, very critical about how a company runs its business. I'm sure many of you have invested in various companies, and you're aware of the Stock Exchange Board of India, SEBI, that's the regulator for the stock market. And they have provided the rules and guidelines. Like they have provided something known as business responsibility reporting. That means they expect the business to be responsible and to report on 10 principles. There are 10 principles that they ask the companies to report on. And that includes, apart from finance, it includes ethics, it includes safety, it includes quality, it includes customers, customer requirements. So these are the various aspects business responsibility reporting requires. And mind you, the investors, including one shareholder, can have the authority to ask the company how they are handling the quality aspects within the organization. Because I have been in the annual general body meetings and the kind of questions that they ask, wherein they inquire, how is the organization handling the quality? How are the FDA inspections happening? And if there are any recommendations from them. So the investors are very, very well aware. I'm sure so also are all of us, because we read about Form 483 US FDA warning letters. We read about US FDA Form 483 issued or observations issued, and it comes in the front page of the newspapers. Not necessarily in the business newspapers, but it's also there in our regular newspapers. It's all very evident, and the news is available across. So you can imagine the heightened, what do you call, emphasis on quality. Much more than ever before, because of many things, because of social media. You have the stakeholders keenly looking for it. You have, investor, what do you call, relations. Then you have healthcare, what do you call, investor and healthcare people who are, providing information to them, educating them, educating the patient. So there's much more heightened interest in the quality of the product, and they can even question us as well. Let's understand what these stakeholders want. Okay, let's understand. One thing is the regulators, the role of the regulator, that is USFDA in America and DCGI in India, is responsible for the society for which they are authorized for. They're responsible for the population of their respective countries. And that's the reason why they're so keenly looking for any breach of or any violation, because that can impact the patient safety. Let's understand the stakeholder requirements. The stakeholder requirements, that is the regulator, the patient, the healthcare industry, the hospitals, the employees, the industry as such, as well as investors, are very, very keen that the firm or the organization or the industry follows as per the law and regulations, as per the rules and regulations of the country. We being in India, we have to follow the law of the land, that is law of India. Okay, and in case our product is being sent to US and it's being marketed in US, then we have to follow the US FDA regulations as well. And then the expectation of stakeholder is for us to follow the good practices standards or the guidelines, that is GXP. So the term GXP is used here. It means GCP, GLP, and GMP. That is good clinical practices, good laboratory practices, and good manufacturing practices. And ISO requirements, not necessarily ISO 9001, but across we have the requirements related to medical devices coming in from ISO 13485, that's the medical devices standards. Then we have ISO 15189, that is the standard for medical laboratories. So we need to adhere to those requirements. IP is intellectual property, the patenting requirements, the intellectual property rules and regulations have to be followed wherever it is relevant. We need to follow ethics and integrity. We need to definitely follow this, because across the industry, we have corporate policies that speak about ethics and integrity, and we have whistleblower policy. Any issues related to that can impact the patient safety. Very, very importantly, integrity of data is very crucial throughout the drug life cycle. We are talking today about product life cycle, but if you look at it from a bigger picture, from the time the drug moves from its initial discovery to development, preclinical or non-clinical research, then into clinical research, and then into product commercialization and manufacturing, throughout this, integrity of data, authenticity of data is very, very critical. It can have an impact on the dossiers submitted to the regulatory agencies. So it can have that much impact. You need to be aware of that. We need to ensure that we are handling the various activities as per the requirement of environment, health and safety, and sustainability. Sustainability is to protect the environment. Okay, so we need to ensure that we handle the entire activity as per the norms. Of course, being in the industry, we have to work within stringent timelines and budget. Budget does matter and timelines does matter. Any delay can have an impact on the entire revenues or entire budgeting. It can go off. So these are the requirement of the stakeholders. And as you are aware, if you can notice from the top, it comes with the rules and regulations and the rest of the other components that are very, very stringent. Okay. And when, if you notice the international standards, a little bit on law and regulations, if you notice, there are international standards like ICH. So these standards have to be translated to our local or regional regulations. So automatically those get translated, and from the national regulations, from international regulation guidelines to national regulations to company policies. That's how the companies capture the regulations. They capture it in policies and then subsequently in work documents that you and I as employees would be using. We would be using the procedures. So automatically those information should be captured in the procedures and then we generate the records. So that's how the regulations or the rules get translated from the law into the documents that you and I would use in the industry. So what are these? If you look at it, these are US CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, the EU directives, the local legislation that is from the DCGI, CDSCO. Then coming to good practices, the ICH GCP, that is E6R2, the ICH Q7 GMP, and OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They have provided the GLP. So when we are conducting non-clinical or preclinical studies in India, we have to follow the OECD GLP requirements as well as the directions given by the NGCMA, that is the National GLP Monitoring Authority, Compliance Monitoring Authority, NGCMA. And in case our data is going to the US, then we have to follow the US requirements, that is 21 CFR Part 58, that is the requirements for non-clinical laboratory. So I hope you're getting the nuances of addressing these requirements in from regulations to our practices. So who is responsible for quality? So typically the answer that we get to hear is that QA, quality assurance. Quality assurance is responsible for quality, or quality unit is responsible for quality, or they say quality control is responsible for quality. But everyone in the industry, whichever role we are playing, you saw the stakeholders there, all of us are responsible for the quality. Especially in an organization, you have various teams. You have teams from the research, you have teams from the discovery, then you have teams from development, then you have teams in manufacturing, product development. So during development, there are a couple of things that happen. You have preclinical development, the clinical research and development, and then you have the various stakeholders in process development, analytical development. And of course, you have the manufacturing teams, the engineering maintenance team, the IT team, the information technology team. We have the EHS team, because they are responsible for the environment, health and safety of the organization. And we have, of course, last but not the least, the quality assurance and quality control. So quite a bit of interfacing teams within an organization, and each one of them and each one of us is responsible for quality. So typically, we do get questioned in the industry, having been in quality throughout my career. We do get questioned, especially by research and development teams, saying that what are the requirements of quality in research? Well, we just saw that now. We need to follow the rules and regulations. We need to follow the company policies and procedures. We need to follow, very importantly, the guidelines, especially related to intellectual property. When it comes to research and development, intellectual property norms take a lot of importance. Okay, so that is what is important, and wherein everything should be recorded in bound lab notebooks, and they have to use calibrated instruments, and they need to ensure that all the systems are in place and they are trained. So they have to follow all the norms, because that's where the initial product or initial molecule is getting sort of conceptualized. That's where they are looking at the viable molecules. If you realize the drug discovery cycle, you have thousands of compounds which undergo screening. Subsequently, it gets down to about hundreds. And then subsequently, at the end of 10 to 12 years, it's one drug molecule that gets into the market. So considering all that, it is very, very critical that research and development teams ensure that quality is maintained throughout the activity. And second, importantly, we have noticed that the inspectors are looking at development of the molecule or process development and method development activities. They're scrutinizing it more often nowadays. In fact, in 2018, when I faced an inspection by US FDA, the inspector spent nearly about a day and a half on pharmaceutical development. They looked at the process development. They looked at the analytical development, because that was getting transferred to the manufacturing area and into the quality control labs. So they're interacting a lot. Once you enter the industry, you need to understand that you'll be interacting a lot, because especially with the regulators, and regulators would like to speak with the people who have actually done the job. In fact, that's the strict instruction they give us. They tell us that we would like to speak to the people who handle the activity in the wet lab area or handle the activity in the manufacturing area, and they don't want the supervisors to speak. So you can imagine the kind of training that these stakeholders need to undergo to face the inspection or to speak during the inspection. So let's understand the definition of quality. It is a degree to which a set of inherent properties of a product, system, or process fulfills requirements. So this is as per the ICH Q9 risk standard coming in from ICH. It is a set of inherent, that means it has to be present within the system, the product, or the process to fulfill the requirements. So let's understand the requirements. It is the explicit or implicit needs or expectations of the patients or their surrogates, that is healthcare professionals, regulators, and legislators. So it is these requirements that we need to address. That means we need to address the regulations. That means we need to fulfill the requirements of the national as well as international norms. The management, coming to pharmaceutical quality systems specifically, the ICH Q10, that is pharmaceutical quality system, is based, the definition is based on ISO 9000 standard. ISO 9000 standard is a standard for vocabulary and definitions. And pharmaceutical quality system provides the management system to direct and control a pharmaceutical company with regard to quality. So we are moving from the routine definition of quality into the pharmaceutical quality systems. So when the entire quality aspect was looked upon by the ICH region, a new paradigm came into the picture, especially when they had to implement ICH Q8, Q9, and Q10. Q8 is related to development, the Q9 is related to risk, and Q10 is related to quality systems. These three are go hand in hand, so to speak. They are interfaced with each other, and it is it's prudent to implement all three together to ensure that the quality systems are enhanced. So considering that, you need to realize that science is no longer isolated. It is living across the life cycle of the product or the process with a quality management system. And what does it say? It says that we need to use science because there should be a scientific rationale when we are into product realization, product development and realization. And quality needs to come into that. And it's a very key enabler throughout the product life cycle. And the knowledge management and risk management ensure that it becomes an integrated approach. You can't think of R&D in isolation with that of quality, development in isolation with that of quality, or product improvement in isolation of quality. It has to be within that entire systems. That's the reason why today we are discussing quality aspects in it. You can't think of it in isolation. So typically what people do is they study science, they study quality, and they fail to interface the two, little realizing that it cannot be in isolation. Because when we are conducting an experiment in say a development lab, we need to ensure all the quality requirements are addressed. What do you mean by quality requirements in an experiment? You need to ensure that the methods are sound, that means qualified. The methods, the instrument and equipment are calibrated. The employee, that is myself, if I'm doing the experiment, I need to be trained and qualified for it. The facility and the infrastructure provided should enable the scientific activity there, because sometimes we would be doing hazardous reactions or hazardous experimentation. All these contribute to the quality attributes. And this is where you identify two very key components or acronyms known as critical quality attributes, critical process parameters. So these are the two identifiers that enable the product quality to move from development to manufacturing. So how does a company ensure that quality is put in place? Because as we discussed, quality is the responsibility of everybody, but how is a company going to put that in place? How are they ensuring that gets communicated? So typically the executive management, that is the top management comprising of chairman and managing director, or the CEO or the COO, they are the team of people, the senior most authorities, along with the head of quality, establish the vision and priorities, and they convey that through quality policies. And more importantly, daily decisions set the tone. Like for example, if the quality philosophy is that we are compliant to regulations, automatically we need to be aware that inspections can happen any day. We have the DCGI office in all the major areas, and definitely we have the US FDA having an office in New Delhi. They can walk in unannounced. We need to be ready for it, ready for inspection every day. What do you mean by that? You take decisions daily. You escalate quality issues. You escalate, for example, failed experiments, failed batches, inconsistencies, any escalation points. All these have to be escalated to a supervisor. Then there is a hierarchy in which it goes. Supervisor to the senior, to the head of the department, then it gets captured by quality assurance, and then it takes forward. Every decision matters. The strength of the quality system or the pulse of the quality system, the health of the quality system is in identifying the issues, escalating the issues, addressing the issues or mitigating the issues, taking the change control or, adopting to the new technologies, new changes. This is what is known as the strength of the quality system or strength or pulse of the quality. This has to be evident in day-to-day operations that we all handle. Okay. So coming from the organization's philosophy, the company identifies a quality vision that gives the behavioral tendencies and it's actionable and the employee performance. So you will see it in the corporate quality policies, in the ethics policies, in the integrity policies, and in the quality policies. So this is where the entire vision is coming together. It's not in isolation, it is along with the entire activity. For example, if the vision of the company firm is related to quality, how does it trickle down to me who's in the lab? I need to ensure that I do the experiment first time right. That means I plan my experiment in such a manner that I ensure that I get the result. But unfortunately, in real life, we do have failed experiments. Very important, we should not hide the data. It needs to be noted down because it gives an opportunity to improve on. Okay, you need to record it and you need to, of course, escalate it to the senior. And if that, what do you say, for me to ensure that I have to do the first time right, that means that becomes my objective in my performance. So when year on year, when they review my performance as an employee, and again, there are ratings for the performance 1 to 5, again, depends on organization to organization. When the ratings come in, based on the number of what do you call failed experiment or inconsistencies, or if I have not identified certain issues which are very, very visible, for a person with the capability and experience as mine, accordingly, I'll be graded. And that definitely has an impact on my, of course, monetary benefits also. Okay, so this is how the companies translate their policy and vision down and percolate it down to day-to-day operations. Objective in the pharmaceutical or healthcare industry, very, very important. Always remember, it's patient safety, data integrity, and compliance. So these are the three important aspects related to the industry. At any point of time, not necessarily only quality team should identify it. Any point of time, any one of you in the stakeholder capacity, if they identified this, then it needs to be addressed and mitigated. This is what even the inspectors review. This is what the inspectors review. At what you see in the papers or what you read in the internet related to warning letters or related to 483s is all related to these three things. Any breach of patient safety, any breach of data integrity and compliance will have an impact. Let us understand data integrity and good documentation practices. A very important acronym, there are a lot of acronyms in our industry. A very important acronym you need to keep in mind is ALCOA Plus. Attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, and the plus comes in from complete, consistent, enduring, and available. Let's briefly understand what this is. Attributable, the data, whatever you and I generate, should be traceable. It should be traceable to the person who's generating the data. It should be legible. That means we should use permanent means of recording the data. Whatever the ALCOA Plus principles are talking about, it's both applicable for paper documents as well as electronic documents. And in many companies, they have both. They have paper documents, they have electronic documents, or they have a mixture of both, that is a hybrid of both. So it's applicable to both instances. The data has to be recorded as we are doing the activity as and when we are doing our experiments or whatever work that we are doing, including inspections. We need to capture it. We need to store the data in the same format that it was generated. This is also known as the source data or the raw data. So you'll be questioned in the industry, show me the raw data or show me the source data. And this is nothing but the original data. In some cases, they will be thermal paper printouts. So what are you going to do with it? So you're going to use a true copy of that and record it. You know, keep a photocopy of that, sign it and date it and authorize it and store that. And accurate data accuracy is something that you need to be very, very aware of. It is what you get is what you report. In case if it is a failed experiment also, whatever failed experimental data you have has to be reported. That is, it has to be reflective and true to the value that you have for the activity you have performed. Consistent, it should be a whole, it should be a complete set. That means if you take a chromatogram, the entire information related to the product or the sample that has been tested should be available. The data, it should be consistent with whatever activity that we have done. It should endure throughout the data life cycle, because sometimes the regulators want the data to be available through many years, and it has to be available for nearly 2 decades plus based on the various regulations. And it has to be available for inspection purposes, very importantly. So let's look at what happens during inspections. When the company submits its dossier or the DMFs to the regulatory agencies, the inspectors or the regulators are already aware of what's happening in the organization before they come for inspection, because they do their homework very well. They review the entire data. So when they come in for inspection, basically they are going to reconstruct the entire activity. That means they are going to do the data traceability of what has been submitted in the dossier. Then they're going to look at the information available with you in the facility. Then they're going to look at the lab records that you and I have generated. Then they're going to look at the backup data tapes or in the server. They're going to keep all those different pieces of the puzzle, and they're going to review to verify if the data is accurate and authentic and traceable. Only then they will say that, yes, the data is traceable and it is authentic. It's only then that you could say the inspection has gained traction and momentum. So what are the expectations of quality systems? Very importantly, there should be a quality unit that is independent. So automatically they look at the organograms, the organization chart, they look where the head of quality is reporting into. The people, they are the people responsible for the quality management. That means they look at the training records of the people, they interact with the people. This is where the quality components are coming in together. So in the industry, training is a very, very key element of quality, because the entire job description of each and every job that we do is mapped. The competencies are derived. The training metrics is derived. Everything is very, very well indicated, and every person will have a job description, a training metrics, and we have to undergo that training. Just because I've got an experience of 2+ decades doesn't mean I don't need to undergo training if I enter a new organization. I am considered a trainee, though at a senior level probably, but I still need to undergo the training as per the requirements of the organization. So some companies have mandatory training. They call it as license to work, a license permit to work thought process. And these are the policies like ethics policies, the whistleblower policies, data integrity policies. So these are the policies mandatorily top down have to undergo, including the CEO every year. Production management, facilities, how they are designed, is it as per the requirement of the product to commiserate the size of the organization? All the requirements, all the nuances have to be addressed in there. The equipment design, as per the requirement, whether it's an API or a biologics, it has to be designed as per the requirement. The facilities have to be designed as per that. And definitely the products and materials that we are going to use have to be required. So these are the various quality components that have to be in place from the time the product is getting manufactured till the product is getting disposed. This is called as the life cycle of the product. And in case the quality attributes have to be addressed, it's also known as cradle to grave concept. So typically industry uses the US FDA Six Sigma approach, six systems approach. If you look at it, the quality system is overarching the entire 5 systems. What are the other 5 systems? It's the production or the manufacturing systems, the facility and the equipment systems, the laboratory control systems, the material systems, that is the raw material in process systems, the packaging and labeling system. So how is the material packaged and how is it labeled and how is it dispatched? And what are the quality requirements in these various activities is what the industry typically looks at. Excuse me. And this is where the industry adapts to these requirements also. So let's look at the strategy that is required, the quality strategy that is required to address the requirements throughout the product life cycle. We need it to be comprehensive. So they recommend the use of the 3 standards, ICH Q8, Q9, and Q10. That is pharmaceutical development, pharmaceutical risk management, and pharmaceutical quality systems to address these requirements. And mind you, each topic is vast. So I am trying to address the requirements of product quality systems. So earlier, pharmaceutical development was more of data transfer, the variable outputs, what have to be addressed. But now it's more of knowledge transfer, the science-based, again, scientific rationale and consistent output. This is something the inspectors would like to see. On what basis did you identify this pathway for process development? On what basis did you identify or justify this path or this method for method development? So these are the things they try to gauge and during their discussions and interactions. Quality risk management. Risk is inherent. There is hazard and then there is risk. So how was it used earlier? It was not that well defined, and practically there were challenges in addressing because many people didn't understand it in the past. Now there is an opportunity to use structured process thinking. So earlier the quality system was more GMP checklist based, like it was a check mark, tick, tick. They went on saying, do you have a quality unit? Do you have SOPs? Again, yes, no, not applicable, sort of a checkbox, and people would just tick that. But now it is across the product life cycle. And let's look at how this is getting linked. The Q9, the Q8, Q10, how is it coming in together for patient, ultimately patient safety, because they are the consumers. So you design the process, material, and facilities, then it moves in, then you assess the risk throughout the design phase, the transfer technology phase, the manufacturing phase, and of course the discontinuation phase. Throughout the entire activity, you are looking at Q9, the risk aspects of it. Okay, and then you move in to the Q10 aspect. So Q10 is seen in terms of a framework for risk to ensure that science-based approaches are used to develop and manufacture pharmaceuticals. The objectives being product realization to ensure it's in a state of control, and definitely for continuous improvement and for overall compliance. So let's understand product life cycle. It initiates throughout The quality initiates throughout pharmaceutical development, technology transfer, commercial manufacturing, and product discontinuation. And I think this entire aspect was enhanced during the COVID-19 phase, wherein the vaccine acceleration happened. And that's where the regulators, the various stakeholders came in together to ensure that the product life cycle was addressed in a timely manner so that the population across the globe got the vaccine to protect them from this virus. Including all the regulators, everybody was involved in this entire product life cycle. It applies to the pharmaceutical drug substances, that is the API, the products, the biotech products, new and existing products, and it has to be used across the life cycle stages. What are these life cycle stages? In the development phase, it is definitely the drug substance, drug product formulation, the delivery system, and medical devices scale up, analytical method developments coming in over here. From the development, when it moves into transfer technology, there are definitely challenges because in the development stage, the molecule would have been tested in their kilolab and it would have been identified with various aspects. And in the technology phase, transfer technology phase, that's when the development teams, the manufacturing teams, E&M, EHS, quality control, quality assurance would be coming together to take over the entire technology transfer. And of course, there are challenges during that as well, because it's scaling up to a quite a big quantity, or the scale up is quite a bit. And then it moves after a couple of validations, it moves into commercial manufacturing. And then it moves into, in case where you would like to discontinue, it would move into that phase as well. The key elements to consider is the management. As we discussed, they have to provide the entire philosophy and the vision. They need to provide the monitoring and review mechanisms, continual improvement. So continual improvement is a very, very interesting terminology and it's often misunderstood. So what happens to a product is that because of new technology, because of new science, because of new thought process, because of new rationale, because of the evidence that is available, the product can be improvised to yield better. For example, or it could be a better method, a sensitive method to identify the various aspects of impurity. So these are the things that are required in knowledge management to continually improve it, to continually improve the product. And this is where the manufacturing team, the quality team, and the development teams come in together. It's a cross-functional teams that come in together to increase the product quality from various angles. And as they say, change is constant. Whenever there is a change or an update that is required for the quality of the product to be done, it has to undergo a change control. Change control is a very critical component of quality in the entire chain of events for a drug manufacturing. And this has to be controlled, this has to be managed throughout the life cycle. That is, even in development labs, whenever there are changes happening, that has to be recorded, because only then you can improve on it. Only when you record it, you will improve on it. If you did not record it, and if you feel it's there in your memory, then you cannot improve on it because it's not evident in your records. As you may be aware in the industry, what is not documented is not improved upon. If it is not done, and if you say you have documented it, and if there is no evidence of it, then it can lead to other issues. That means There is no data integrity there. So everything needs documentation, including in research and development activities. I'm emphasizing research and development because it's very, very critical aspect. And it gets recorded in lab notebooks or in minutes of the meeting or in memos or whichever practice the institution, or research institution, or it could be even in the company. Because in company, in R&D departments, it's very critical to note down the changes because of intellectual property, of patenting requirements. And for a company, it's very, very critical. IP is very, very critical. Intellectual property is very, very critical. So the pharmaceutical quality system, if you note, is again overarching philosophy, which is also providing guidelines. So guidelines are used in absence of regulations. And if you notice, the management responsibilities across the entire life cycle, and there is continual improvement of the process performance. And when it comes to investigational products, especially for human use, we have to follow the GMPs, the regulatory requirements across. The pharmaceutical quality system is coming in. If you look at the component or the line item indicating PQS, the product is monitored. So for example, let me give you an example. So when they are transferring, this is a hypothetical example. So when they are transferring a product from the development labs to manufacturing area, things may go on fine, but later on when they are doing the batches, they may notice when they're drying the material, they may notice some particles. Instead of the material being uh, white to off-white crystalline powder, they may have an instance of having some black particles or brown particles in that. So what do organizations do? They immediately note it down. It's a deviation, it is investigated, and that investigation will extend to pharmaceutical development. It goes to the development labs. That's when the development teams get involved in it. They try to isolate those particles, they try to understand the particles, and this is where you could say surveillance. You can call it as a monitoring, or you can call it as a surveillance mechanism, wherein the product is looked upon as to why it could have happened. There's a full scale investigation that happens. Okay, and they also review if this has happened with other patches, so it can get extended. So that's how the quality system monitoring happens throughout the life cycle. And of course, they take a corrective and preventive action on it. And then they change any process or fine tune any process. And then it comes back to manufacturing again. So this is like a cycle, improvement cycle, continuous improvement cycle. And during this phase, knowledge is getting managed. That means when there's transfer technology, there's also knowledge that gets transferred. And of course, risk is getting assessed in all these phases, not only in terms of quality, even in environment, health, and safety. Process hazard analysis, risk analysis, HAZOP studies. These are environment studies. Basically, they are trying to identify, they're trying to study the molecule, they're trying to fingerprint the molecule from all aspects, from different perspectives. And this ensures there is improvement of the entire quality systems. So detail about the structure, this standard is of course available at the ICH website. You could go through it, but just to give you an enhanced overview of this, the structure speaks about the quality systems, the management responsibility, whatever we have spoken till now in the entire previous slide, the improvement, again, continual improvement. Again, this has to be as per the requirement of your particular organization. Again, because that can vary, the size can vary, the products can vary, The regulatory requirements could vary. So again, this is a strategy that has to be devised. So this is called as a quality strategy. Very, very important. Just like how you have a regulatory strategy, it's very important to have a quality strategy. So again, it provides the risk and knowledge management as to how, because it has to be informed risk, or it has to be knowledgeable. And again, it has to have a scientific rationale. So every activity that you record should be justified scientifically with a scientific rationale. So this experiment failed. So when you investigated, this is what happened. And these are the various line items that you reviewed during your investigation. So all these things have to be captured. Again, management responsibility, we discussed about the policy, the planning, resources, whether the management would like to check the health, the pulse of the quality. So they typically have a management review meeting once a quarter. Again, depends on the size of the organization. They can have it monthly, they can have it periodically, once in 6 months as well. Very importantly, outsourcing. Globalization of economy has enabled outsourcing. Like, they can be a company based anywhere in the world, a virtual company, and they have an idea about the molecule, and they can outsource the entire activity from start to finish. That means research, development, manufacturing, supply chain, everything can be outsourced. This is where the controls have to be even more enhanced, because the marketing authorization holder is owning that product, and they have to ensure that the quality of the product is assured throughout the life cycle. We did discuss about the continual improvement thought process. So life cycle stage goals include design of the product, very importantly, to consistently deliver the performance, because we are talking about commercialization in a bigger scale. So the aim is to align the mind from the development phase to ensure that those requirements are met. And of course, technology transfer, where the process knowledge or the product knowledge is getting transferred. And it could be between two sides, or it could be a contract giver to the contract taker. So it's a lot of stakeholders are involved in this. Multiple people, multiple permutations and combinations, considering the complexities of the world that we are living in. Commercial manufacture, that is batch on batch, we need to ensure that the state of control is maintained. And we need to ensure that it is continually improved. That means we need to do trend analysis of this. We need to capture the metrics, data analytics. This is where data analytics is coming into the pharmaceutical industry. Data analytics. There is a guidelines provided by US FDA called as request for metrics. That's where the data is getting captured. The metrics that is required have been mapped by the US FDA, so that we capture that information, we capture the trends and provide it to the FDA. And based on that, they come in as per their risk-based inspection methodology to inspect us. And of course, how do we manage in an instance the product is withdrawn or discontinued? So the PQS elements, these are available with the ICH Q10, but just to ensure that we need to identify the sources or the variation of the continual improvements. We need to address those requirements, and that's why trends are continuously monitored. Trend analysis, is it an upward trend, downward trend, is it out of trend? Just like how we have out of specifications, out of trend, how are these analyzed? And how is it done throughout the development, transfer tech, manufacturing through discontinuation? Again, during the pharmaceutical development, as I said, the CQA and CPP needs to be well defined when it moves into the next phase of activity. Again, throughout this, how are we ensuring? Because we are talking about real life scenarios. We have a thought process in mind as to how to design an experiment, design of experiments, DOE. That's another interesting concept, DOE. Okay, so this is something that is defined. And during that, there are chances that the experiment can fail. There are chances that when I'm going to do an experiment that the machine is out of calibration. So what is the corrective action I'm going to take? And how am I going to prevent it? Corrective action is to ensure it does not occur. Sorry, it does not recur. Preventive action is to ensure it does not occur. So what are these methodologies that we are using? All these have to be documented. As again, a thumb rule in the industry, everything should be documented. Objective, evidence-based. That's what audits are doing. Auditors are not, or for that matter, inspectors are not trying to find faults. They are trying to do the entire reconstruction of activity to identify the potential systems. For example, during an inspection, they can ask you, was there a product failure? Was there a batch failure? Did an experiment fail? Yes, it did happen. Was there a data integrity issue? Yeah, that's a favorite topic of the inspectors. Did a data integrity issue happen? Yes, it did happen. And how are these identified? How are these addressed? There was an instance where we had to show the inspector of a data integrity breach for a stability study. And then we showed them the quality control investigation that happened with the QA and other team, cross-functional teams, how the entire activity was taken up, and what was the corrective and preventive action that was done. That was in case of commercial manufacturing. It could happen even in pharmaceutical development phase. How are you ensuring that these are addressed? How are the corrective and preventive measures are taken? How are you addressing change? Again, very, very importantly, how are you evaluating change? And also the risk component comes into the picture over here. This is again a pharmaceutical quality system element. And how that is getting addressed throughout the technology transfer and then into commercial manufacturing. This has to be documented, especially in the pharmaceutical development. We have something called as a term called as phase appropriate GMP requirements have to be addressed. Phase appropriate, this is the term that is used in the industry. Phase appropriateness of the GMP requirements to be addressed in the pharmaceutical development. What are the phase? Is it early phase? Is it late phase molecule? That means, is it getting into clinical trials? So what are the requirements of quality there? How stringent should the quality aspects be? So this is called as phase appropriateness. The review of the entire activity has to be presented to the management. That's where the management checks the pulse or the health of quality across various. Earlier, it would be typically in commercial batches, but now it's moving towards the development phase, where the organization, especially the top management, because they're not there day in, day out within the lab. So they would like to see, how is the molecule progressing? How is the molecule? Are there any hindrances to the molecule? Are there any roadblocks to the development? These are especially related to quality. These are the requirements that the industry is, or rather the management is looking for, the trends. They're looking at escalations. So these are the requirements that has to be addressed. Then again, they're looking at aspects of management review that can be performed to ensure adequacy of the product and process design. Are there any design changes? Are there any design validations that needs to be done? You know, these very, very important nuances of the product have to be identified by the product development team. And again, this has definitely an impact on the quality of the product in the future as well, because automatically they question if there's any change. I'm talking about practicality. If there's any change, if there's any issue in the technology transfer or method transfer, automatically the question comes from the management is, wasn't this thought of during product development or method development? So automatically we start thinking and they go back to the books, they go back to the data, they scrutinize the data, because that's where it can impact the transfer. Continual improvement, again, monitoring the internal, external factors impacting the pharmaceutical quality system. Very, very important are the regulations. As you know, science, technology, IT-enabled services, especially we are using a lot of IT systems. We are using various computerized systems across. We're using learning management systems, laboratory information management systems, chromatographic data capturing systems, so many within the industry. It's changing a lot. It's evolving a lot. Let me put it that way. It's evolving a lot. Is the company evolving with the regulations? So typically companies have teams that evaluate or do regulatory surveillances. What are the changes in the regulations? What are the changes in the technology? What are the changes in process technologies? And very importantly, even in the development phase, they're looking at it. That's where they are looking at enhancing these requirements. Like, for example, many companies are using, especially in the labs, they're already using tabs so that the data is getting captured real time. So these are the various aspects. So what are the advantages of putting in or understanding the quality aspects? It gives a harmonized concept of pharmaceutical quality system across the entire life cycle. Then it's extension and acceptance of these concepts. And again, because we are looking at the global trends, so automatically from the development phase through tech transfer, through commercialization, everybody is aligned global for the global requirements, because it's changing quite a lot. It demonstrates how the robust the quality systems are, as I said, how fast the escalation mechanism is in place. Technical innovation is there, definitely to improve the consistency and enhancing the availability of medicines. It encourages reduction in variability and definitely improves process robustness and efficiency. Earlier, the development and manufacturing teams were in isolation, but no, now it's more of interfacing teams, especially because of knowledge management, because there would be some kind of restrictive behavior. It's much more enhanced behavior wherein they do collaborate. It's more a collaborative approach than a standalone approach. That does impact the company revenues also, because everybody is in the thought process of doing the quality of the product and ensure that the activity is getting enhanced. Little bit on very, very brief on risk, because that itself, as I said, is a separate topic altogether. Risk is a combination of probability of occurrence of harm and severity of that harm. And how quick can you detect it is also a very important, crucial aspect of it. So quality risk management is the systematic process for the assessment, control, communication, and review of the risk of what? Of the medicine, the medicinal product across the product life cycle. There are two primary principles. The risk should be based on the scientific knowledge. Again, science is coming here. Please remember, whichever department you would belong to, it has to be based on scientific justification. Everything should have a scientific justification with data. And it has to protect the patient. And the level or the effort or the formality, it should be to commiserate with the level of risk. And this is the entire risk management process where it has the risk assessment, it goes through risk controls, through risk review, and it gets communicated. Very important for you to understand is that the risk does not come to zero. It can be minimized to an acceptable level of risk, but it can never be nil. The risk factor is always there. Okay, the risk factor is always there, but however, with controls, it can be minimized. Through the risk priority number, the risk gets addressed, that is detecting probability and severity of it. Based on that, you will analyze the risk. Say if the risk scale is 1 to 10, and when you analyze the risk is high to the level of risk of failure, say for example, or the failure of the batch is high, then you identify the various steps that contribute to the risk, calculate for each step. Even if it is high, then you put controls, you put resources, you put additional controls, additional testing, bring it down, but again, it'll never be nil. You accept the risk, you accept that risk rating, and that you review in your quality systems. So this is how risk management comes into the picture. Unfortunately, I cannot go into it much detail from technology transfer and all that from that perspective. That requires a separate session altogether. So a little bit on regulatory inspection. Again, they come in from the thought process of patient safety, data integrity, and compliance. That's what they are reviewing. And the outcome is NAI, VAI, or OAI. There is no action indicated. That means there could only be a few recommendations. VAI typically would be a form 483. That's a form in their inspectional procedures. So that's why it's so well known. It's form 483. And OAI typically is wherein they may put in sanctions against them, again related to their regulations. So to summarize, quality aspects of product lifecycle management enables a harmonized concept of PQS between 3 ICH regions, which is again taken across globally. It has to be applied in a manner that is appropriate to the size of the organization and according to the product lifecycle stages and different goals for each phase of the development. So this is where I would like to conclude my session.
Thank you, ma'am, for a very informative talk on the quality aspects of the product lifecycle management. Indeed, it was very informative, and it was in an easy language. It was very easily understandable, and you have almost covered all the aspects. But because of the time, lack of time, we could not touch many aspects. But you have tried to cover all the aspects, and it is very easily understandable for our students also, ma'am.
Thank you.
And there are some of the questions which are raised by the students, and
Yes, please.
I'll just go through it.
Yes.
Ma'am, can I just tell the questions?
Yes, you can please tell the questions.
If
yes.
any clinical trials for a drug are outsourced, who are held responsible for facing the audits?
So the sponsor, they are called as a sponsor, and they may outsource some activities to a CRO, clinical research organization, or a contract research organization. And in turn, the clinical trials would be done at the various sites. So when an inspection happens, based on the responsibilities indicated in the agreements, the CRO and the sponsor will be undergoing the inspections as well as the sites. Again, again it varies on what you call clinical trial case-to-case basis, and they agreements. It's called as TORO, transfer of regulatory obligations. This is indicated in 21 CFR Part 312. And as per that, they will do the inspection. So if in case the sponsor has half the responsibility and the CRO has the other half of the responsibility, then both would be getting inspected based on that very, very important document, very, very critical document.
Thank you, ma'am. And one more question. If any deviations are documented, how long do we need to archive or store by industry?
So if there are any deviations are identified, typically the mechanism to close the deviation should be within 30 days. And the storage of these documents will be as per, excuse me, as per the requirements of the regulatory and as per the requirements of the company procedures. Some companies store it for about anywhere between 5 to 10 years. And again, it depends on the agencies. And if in case it's a contract research organization, it's based on the client. Sometimes the client wants them to store it for nearly 20 years. So they will have to store it. They'll have to work out a mechanism to store it.
Ma'am, another question where what are the problems faced during commercialization of technology?
Yes, lot of problems, lot of real life scenarios. Sometimes the molecule may not behave the way it has behaved in the kilo lab or in a small batches, because we are talking about 1 to 2 kg to, say, for example, 500 to a ton. The reactor size is different, the reaction mass is different. So there are a lot of challenges that come here. Sometimes even the quality of raw material use also has impact. So a lot of challenges, and some unexpected. In case of, say, if it's an organism, then it may not grow in the rate at which they would have done in their lab scale. Also, a lot of challenges are there in that process technology. Also, yes.
Another 1 or 2 questions can I take up?
Yes,
now?
yes, please.
Yeah. Ma'am, what are the latest cutting edge research going on in the field of pharmaceutical product life cycle management?
Quite a bit, I think. Technology is advancing quite a lot, and there are various mechanisms. I would say they're using various tools. They're using informatics, they're using data analytics. They're using these tools. Various companies, big pharma companies, MNCs, they have their own tools. They have what do you call R&D tools, modeling tools, so to speak, and they're using those various methods. They're using various analytical methods. So sensitivity of it is also increasing. So this is what I would say from my perspective. Yeah, I'm more into quality and compliance than into technology as such. Yes. Next.
Yeah. How often should computer systems be evaluated in a pharmaceutical industry?
So when we are purchasing a computerized system, we have to evaluate it, we have to validate it. So that's computerized system validation. It's called a CSV. It has to be conducted that way, and it has to undergo periodic. Any change, again, change control is coming here also. Any change that can impact the entire data capture or the data transfer or anything, again, or for example, as you're aware, that computerized system undergoes updates, because the software updates, even we are seeing even in our phones, there are a lot of updates that happen. Any of those updates that can impact or the version change in the software, whenever it is done, then it has to undergo a revalidation. Again, this whole philosophy will be written in the validation master plan. It's in that they will indicate how often it will be undergoing the revalidation program.
Another one question.
Yes.
Can you just elaborate on confidential agreement and MOUs in relation to technology transfer?
Yes. As you are aware, very good question. As you are aware that transfer technology has major IP, intellectual property, and of course that value for money that any company or any innovator We are looking at innovator molecules. Everybody is very, very clear on that. So this is where confidential disclosure agreement is put in place first. Before speak to each other of anything, a company will definitely put a CDA or non-disclosure agreement, NDA, in place before they even take any step forward. And after that is done, the companies also provide, for example, if they've contracted it to somebody, that's why I was emphasizing on lab notebooks. Companies provide specialized lab notebooks. It could be electronic lab notebooks, it could be hard copy, these are bound. You should look at those books, they're thick volumes, page numbered. It's like, the legal authority, the legal counsel of that company would have authorized that entire design of the lab book, how to capture, what to capture, because and any step, any critical step of that particular molecule development has to be witnessed by their employee. That means if they've contracted it to a contract organization, those critical steps which has IP value has to be witnessed. That means they will physically come and witness those steps. It is that stringent nowadays. And then it has to be captured, it has to be countersigned, everybody puts those things in place. And yes, MOU is a bigger picture, but MOU is along with CDA, also with each and every service level agreement also will be there. Stringent, everything will be, you could say, watertight agreements. Something very, very interesting. And they also come for confidential information audit. They come to audit companies to see how the people in the lab, people in the manufacturing area handle these information in a confidential manner, whether they are trained and all that. They will definitely check those things.
So, and, in which aspect of the drugs life cycle management are the pharmaceutical companies involved?
Again, it varies. Again varies company to company. They may just be an innovator. They may identify that particular what do you call schema, so to speak, and they may hand over that to transfer the technology to a bigger company, or they may do end to end also. Some company also do it from R&D to commercialization, but many companies, as I said, virtual companies, they outsource it. Again, it models differ. Again, because of the finances, it differs.
We have finished with the majority of the questions, ma'am, and it was very informative.
Thank you very much for the opportunity provided.
Thank you, madam. One second. Thank you, madam. Thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you. I hope I was.
Yes, madam. Yes, you have answered all the queries asked by the participants.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I request Mr. Hemant Kumar, who is a faculty of our department, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, Hemant.
Thank you, Dr. Gaurav. Good morning, everyone. I'm Hemant Kumares, faculty in Department of Pharmaceutics. With the blessings of His Holiness Swamiji, I'm extremely honored to propose the vote of thanks on this great occasion of the webinar on Pharma Toolkit Lecture Series 1, Quality Aspects of Product Lifecycle Management. I thank our beloved Pro-Chancellor, Dr. B. Suresh Sir, and Vice Chancellor, Dr. Surendra Singh Sir, who have conveyed the best wishes for the webinar. We are grateful to our today's speaker, Ms. Lakshmi Achyuta, Strategic Advisor for Biotech and Pharma and Advisory Committee member of Indian Society for Clinical Research, South Chapter, for her wonderful and informative talk. Thank you, ma'am. We thank the advisory committee members of ISCR, Ms. Radhika Bobba, Ms. Mala Srivastav, and Dr. Gaurav Mathur for their extended support. We are extremely thankful to our beloved principal, Dr. T.M. Pramod Kumar, for supporting us in all regards in our endeavors. Thank you, sir. We also thank convener, Dr. D.V. Gowda, Professor and Head Department of Pharmaceutics, for supporting us always. Dr. Balmudra, Coordinator for the webinar series, Associate Professor, and Organizing Secretary, Dr. H.V. Gangadharappa, Associate Professor, for the planning and supporting in conducting this webinar series. Thank you, sir. We thank our beloved CIO, Dr. Ravindra sir and his team for providing the technical support for organizing the event successfully. We extend our thanks to all the teaching staff and student participants. I once again, on behalf of the convener, principal, staff and students, convey my best sincere thanks to Ms. Lakshmi Achyuta ma'am and all the participants for involving in the webinar activity. Thank you. Have a
Thank you
good
very
day.
much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.